Walking through the city, lights all aglow. Everybody's got a story to show. Wheels keep spinning, streets overflow. Hustle never stops, we're in the flow. Skylines high like our dreams in the air. Concrete jungle, we got flair. Rhythm of the night, we don't care. Underneath the stars we breathe rare. In this urban jungle we're alive. Heartbeats echo as we strive. Dreams collide where the streets survive. Together we'll thrive, side by side. Echoes of the past linger near. Future calls, we face it with no fear. Every corner tells a tale so clear. In the city, we chase what we hold dear. Shadows and whispers blend in the night. City's pulse beats with all its might. Lost in the chaos, but it feels right. We rise above, reach new heights. In this urban jungle, we're alive. Heartbeats echo as we strive. Dreams collide where the streets survive. Together we'll thrive, side by side.
And good evening and welcome to tonight at Order Paper Podcast. Welcome back, Laura. How did you enjoy being a spectator at the 3 p.m. show?
Painful. Not because of you guys. Not because of you guys. It's just because of Gary and David Seymour. That was hard to listen to.
Oh, I certainly can understand. I can confirm more things. If we remember from the 3 p.m. show, there was apparently going to be a debate about the treaty with David Seymour at Newtown School. I drove past it at 5:30. The hall was all completely locked up. So I think someone got their wires crossed. But I hope like hell that the Facebook wire cross, they ended up watching our show instead.
Man, that would have been so good. If they was holding the debate, you would have sold out on coffees, popcorn, everything.
Well, hey, if there was a debate there, I would have had the coffee cart there. I would have given you and Stacey and Kiwi Security and I can't think who else access to the cameras outside so you could actually watch the shit happening. I mean, there could be all sorts there. Now, there is a correction that needs to be made from last week's show. I've gone and found more information. There were comments about MP Laura McCure, who was previously known as Laura Trask, and there was a mix-up about maiden and married name. Laura's Trask was the maiden name. She has gone back to her maiden name as Laura McCure. So that is something that has been mentioned. There's not much else that can be in there, but possibly she could be going for a divorce or has just been divorced. It is something, if you look at the United States, that is actually common to see female MPs end up divorcing their husbands upon election. I mean, Marjorie No Divorce Taylor got a divorce, and Lauren No Divorce Bobbitt also got a divorce.
Yeah, so, that's why last week I said it's really a non-issue.
Yeah.
It's not something to get your bloody knickers in a twist about.
No, but I thought I'd let that correction get out there so we can be a bit more aware of what's actually what things were happening there. Now the great news is today there are no seat warmer speeches. which it seems very weird because we usually national. Well, I'll rephrase that. Usually the governing party tends to have seat warmer speeches.
Kiwi Skirt would be pleased to not listen to the music.
I don't know. No. I think once knowing the context of what it's about, it's been a bit different. I think it was not understanding. Okay, it's just the name. Oh no, that's a different one. Yeah. Oh, now Stacey goes, no, anime theme song this week. Well, we can always play the music. I'll find it somewhere. So let's kick off with the new minted Minister of Transport, the Bish from Hutt South, Chris Bishop.
Let's go.
Amendment Bill. I move that the Land Transport Drug Driving Amendment...
Hang on, one step between that. That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Honourable Chris Bishop.
I move that the Land Transport Drug Driving Amendment Bill be now read a second time. First of all, Madam Speaker, this is my first speech as the newly appointed 3 days in Minister of Transport, and I want to start by acknowledging the work of my predecessor, the Honourable Simeon Brown, who's, I was going to say moved on to better things, but I'm not sure that's necessarily true, but he's moved on to a different portfolio, and I picked up the mantle of the government's important work in transport and infrastructure. And I want to start by acknowledging him and the work that he and the team at MOT and police did on this piece of work. And I also want to acknowledge the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee, very ably chaired by Andy Foster, and sound contributions from across the House. And I want to thank everyone who made a submission on this bill. In particular, I want to thank Dr Helen Paulson from the Institute of Environmental Science and Research, ESR, for her invaluable expert advice on this very technical piece of legislation. Madam Speaker, I should say, alcohol and drugs, as I think most members will know, are the #1 contributing factor in fatal road crashes in New Zealand. In 2022, they were contributors to 200 fatal crashes on our roads. And despite this, police have no way to undertake saliva testing for drugs at the roadside, and only 26% of drivers think they are likely to be caught while driving under the influence of drugs. So just reflect on that. 75% of people think that they are unlikely to be caught while driving under the influence of drugs. Now, as members will know, this issue of saliva roadside oral fluid drug testing has a interesting history. I think I'm right in saying this is Parliament's third attempt at introducing roadside drug testing. The last legislation introduced by the previous government did not work, as there was no commercially available testing device that met the criteria. So we committed to solving this problem, and indeed that is what this bill does. So the amendments to the Land Transport Act are focused on creating a workable regime that reflects the capability of drug testing devices available. It enables oral fluid testing at the roadside to better detect and deter people driving after consuming and impairing drugs. From 2019 to 2023, crashes involving drug drivers claimed the lives of 108 people each year on average. That is 30% of road deaths annually. And as I said before, only 26% of people think they are likely to be caught. So the detection and deterrence of drug driving, complementary to the successful alcohol breath testing regime, which I might note in passing, Madam Speaker, was controversial when first introduced. And it is actually instructive to go and read the Hansard back from the 1990s, when Parliament made the far-sighted decision to say too many people drink and drive, you need a deterrence and a detection system out there to make sure that fewer people do it and that those who do get caught and then get punished. And there's all sorts of debates about rights and testing and unreasonable search and seizure. And it actually is true to say that the Land Transport Amendment Act 1991 from memory got a Section 7 report under the Bill of Rights Act, and Parliament went ahead and did it anyway because they thought it was the right thing to do. It was a bit controversial at the time, but it is impossible to envisage a New Zealand today in which there is no roadside breath testing. I mean, just imagine that. It is impossible to imagine a situation where we didn't have roadside breath testing. It's now a completely normal and accepted part of everyday New Zealand society. And actually, this government has put more money into increasing the numbers of breath tests because there was a steep decline in previous years. So, there were concerns at the Select Committee about the regime targeting recent drug use rather than impairment. Now, clearly impairment varies from person to person, and the relationship between drug concentrations and oral fluid and impairment is complex. Devices test for drug concentrations above a threshold that captures recent drug use. The regime uses recent use as a proxy for impairment. This is similar, as I say, to the alcohol testing regime. There's another concern raised by submitters about the accuracy. We know that the devices are not always 100% accurate. A small number of roadside screening tests with false results, both positive and negative, are unavoidable given the capability of the devices. To mitigate this, 2 positive screening tests will be required at the roadside before a driver is stood down. The bill also introduces a requirement for oral fluid sample to be sent to an approved laboratory for testing following a positive screening test result at the roadside. An infringement fee and demerit points will only be issued if the laboratory test detects the presence of a specified qualifying drug at a level that is indicative of recent use. Now, the Select Committee has recommended some changes which the government will agree to in relation to the approval criteria for roadside oral fluid screening devices. There was a risk, I'm advised, that commercially available screening devices would still not meet the approval criteria due to the ambiguity surrounding some of the criteria. So the new criteria allows the Minister of Police to approve devices after considering the accuracy of the device and the extent to which the threshold used by the device will return a positive result that indicates recent use of a drug or family of drugs. The Minister of Police will need to consider these factors in the context of the overall purpose of the new regime to better detect and deter drivers after recently using drugs. The bill, as reported back, requires the Minister of Police to consider device accuracy in light of the requirements for screening oral fluid as set out in the relevant provisions. The provisions require 2 positive screening tests at the roadside before a person is prohibited from driving for 12 hours. This is intended to mitigate the possibility of action being taken at the roadside because of false positive screening test results. Now, I mentioned before the implications for rights and freedoms. The bill does have implications, and there have been concerns raised by the Attorney-General and submitters. So the committee considered whether the bill should include a maximum time limit for enforcement officers to administer the first screening test. The committee asked that this issue be given further thought. The The government has thought about these concerns and we appreciate them. We are not proposing to amend the bill in this way because of the range of factors that influence the length of time taken to complete the screening test. For example, the time for the device to return a result, the cooperation of the driver, the ability of the driver to produce enough oral fluid. Here's the rub. Legislating a time frame potentially incentivises drivers to prolong the process in order to avoid undergoing a test. And so that would send the wrong message and incentive clearly, and that would completely undermine the effectiveness of the regime. And it's worth, again, also bearing in mind, it's out of step with the alcohol breath testing regime. So essentially we are bringing the law around drugs as much as we possibly can into line with the law around alcohol. There are further amendments which the government supports. One was a provision for the drivers to seek an independent laboratory test, as I've covered off, aligning with the alcohol breath testing. The committee also recommended changes to simplify the statutory review process, requiring the review to be completed within 5 years of the bill's commencement. Government will support those changes. Another change was to remove restrictions that currently prevent an enforcement officer from switching to a compulsory impairment test once they have initiated an oral fluid screening test. This change ensures that officers are supported to use their judgment where they have good cause to suspect drug use. I want to take this opportunity to reassure members that the regime is designed with safeguards to ensure fair administration. Devices will have built-in positive screening thresholds to avoid capturing drivers with low levels of drugs. The 12-hour stand-down period following 2 positive screening tests is intended to address the immediate road safety risk the driver poses. A medical defence will still be available to ensure that the oral fluid testing regime does not penalise drivers who are taking prescription medication at the direction of their medical health professional. Madam Speaker, the bill is a key action in the government's plan to improve road safety, actively addressing the contributing factor to over 100 road deaths annually. As I said before, I do believe that as other countries have done and other jurisdictions have done, we will eventually look back in a few years' time and say, goodness me, how extraordinary was it that you could get high and drive without anyone thinking that they would possibly catch you? And unsurprisingly, a bunch of people do that. And how extraordinary is it that that is the case? Eventually, we will sit back, as we do now, about alcohol breath testing, which was similarly controversial at the time, and say, goodness me, how crazy was it that in the 1980s you could drink and drive and no one went out and checked whether or not you were drinking and driving? We will eventually do exactly the same thing for drugs, and that is why I commend the bill to the House.
And I mean, the same thing can also be said about the time of day before you had to wear seatbelts in cars.
It's not comparable to drink, though. It's not, because drugs can hang around in the body for much longer, right, than, say, alcohol. With a breathalyzer test, you can detect alcohol, right? Yeah,
and it's a near instant, for the yes or no is an instant result.
And you get it while the person's impaired, right, or the person's already has problems with their driving. The problem with drugs is that you could take a medication that can be in your system for up to a couple of days, and if you get detected when you're not high and you're still safe to drive, still able to drive, you could be docked for you can't drive for 12 hours. And let's say you go through another test again, and this drug is still in your system, and it's like another 12 hours. I
mean, put it this way, the saliva testing is based on what's on the tongue. That's not based on what's in the blood. I mean, we do not have the ability at this point to actually test impairment level based on blood results on the side of the road. I mean, I'll probably say we can probably, in theory, for a RATS test, there is a test that you can do HIV, and there's a test you can do syphilis that you can test on, but that just gives a yes or no answer. That doesn't actually state what the blood level is in your bloodstream. And that's something that hasn't actually been looked at as the bill is, is there rapid blood testing for that sort of stuff as well? Like, by the sounds of it, it's just stopping at saliva.
Well, the blood tests have to be voluntary. Pretty sure they have to be voluntary. So there are a couple of problems with this bill. I actually looked at the Law Society's submission, and they brought up some really good points that align with the Attorney General's concerns. So this is the unreasonable search and seizure, the liberty of the person, and the right to be presumed innocent till proven guilty according to law. That's the biggest one, by the way, 25 subsection C of the Bill of Rights. It's, there's uncertainty about the reliability and the accuracy of the oral fluid testing devices. And so there are concerns that, they can actually pick up the detection. They can actually detect whether the drug is still in your system, even though you may not be high or impaired to the point that you can't drive.
And I mean, also the other thing is, if you take mouthwash, does that play around with a potential result?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because mouthwash can play around with a breath test result, causing a false positive.
It's possible. I didn't really look into that, but you know what I found really odd about Chris Bishop's stats and figures that he was quoting? They were coming
he would have got them from Simeon.
Yeah, they came from 2022. I mean, we've got access to data. I mean, I just looked up the data, and I'll chuck it in the in the
Because
chat.
I think the principle behind this bill on a previous attempt was in the last government.
Oh, okay, 2022.
Yeah. So I think this is one of those bills that didn't quite get there, but was in the working process. New government came along, new government looked at the old bill and went, yeah, we want to continue that. And it is evident when it comes to the voting at the end. Labour supports it. Only Te Pāti Māori and the Greens don't.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of reasons for that, and one of them is lack of public consultation as well with this bill.
Yeah.
So I again, reading through the impact statements, and I know where he's got that stat from when he says, 75% of drivers, whatever, thought that, they're not going to get caught doing drug driving. That came from a survey that the University of Waikato did back in 2017, which found that 60% of drivers thought people were likely to be caught by police for drink driving, but only 26% thought they were likely to get caught for drug driving. But the problem is when you use stats like that, that's almost 10 years old. Perceptions may have changed since then. I don't know. It would be good to get another survey.
Well, I mean, this was an example when Wellington's. I mean, this is not drug driving related, but when the introduction of the electronic speed signs on the Wellington Urban Motorway, when the smart motorway kicked in, some people thought the electronic signs weren't the speed limit, but a recommendation.
I just
want to had a red border around them. So there are, and it was at 30% believed it was a recommendation. So that sort of thing. There is, vibe feeling doesn't necessarily constitute fact.
A really good point that I thought the Law Society brought up was that this bill risks creating an arbitrary double standard. So some people who become eligible for a blood test through the inability to produce an oil fluid sample, or as a result of failing a compulsory impairment test, will be subject to a different threshold than those whose impairment is assessed on the basis of oral fluid. So there is that risk.
Yeah, there is that risk. Should we move on to Tangi Utakera to see his speech?
Tangi Utakera.
Kia ora, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to rise on behalf of the Labour Party. We supported this bill at first reading. We supported it through Select Committee and will continue to support it at second reading with a couple of caveats there. Can I first acknowledge the Minister on his new portfolio? Members of the side House agree that road safety is a priority and is important, and anything that will prevent fatalities, injuries on our roading network is a good thing to do. And that's why Labour did introduce a regime when it was in government. I want to acknowledge the Select Committee. The members of the Transport Infrastructure Committee, a very collegial committee. Can I acknowledge the Chair, Andy Foster, for chairing us through this process. And I think the Select Committee report actually is a very fair reflection of the conversations, the issues that the committee tussled with, and effectively where we landed as a committee as well. I want to acknowledge the advisors that provided advice to the committee, and also, along with the Minister, want to acknowledge Dr. Helen Paulson, who was able to provide from ESR a scientific basis and background to testing. Actually, certainly for me, provide a level of comfort around the testing that does take place out at ESR, but it's still important to be able to understand what can be a complex issue moving forward. One of the things that the Minister did touch on, something that members on this side of the House don't have comfort around, are the concerns that the Attorney General did raise. There were a couple of concerns that she rose in her report. One was around the possibility of detaining someone for a period of time that was rather excessive on an arbitrary sort of notion. The other was around the freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. What the committee did is it worked extremely hard to then turn its mind to try and address some of the issues that had been raised. I have to say I'm very disappointed to hear from the Minister that one of the issues that was in the Select Committee, which was really encouraging the government to turn its mind to a possible maximum time by which a driver would be detained on the roadside, is something that the government is not prepared to pursue. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because the Select Committee, I thought, worked extremely in a collegial way to get to a point where it signalled to the government that this is something that members on that committee, including national members on that committee, were very comfortable to have. Now, we weren't able to land on a particular time period because two reasons. One, the advisors were not in a position to be able to provide a specific time frame to us. And secondly, the amount of time that the committee had, because this was on a truncated sort of time frame in front of the committee, meant that we weren't able to delve into this issue perhaps as deeply as we would have liked to. So those were the constraints that led to the committee being very clear in its Select Committee report back to this House that there really is an expectation that the government, in seeking to address the concerns that the Attorney General has made around this bill, will turn its mind to implementing a maximum time frame. Now, we heard from the advisors that one of the reasons for not having a maximum time frame was because an alcohol breath screening test doesn't have that. When we turn our mind to other jurisdictions like Australia, where, in some situations, a first screening test could be up to 10 minutes. In other circumstances, a second oral fluid test could be up to 40 minutes. The view from members on this side of the House, and I thought of the committee at the time as well, was that there needed to be a fair understanding of what is a fair period of time that anyone who is driving here in New Zealand can expect to actually be stopped on the side of the road for the first oral fluid test. The second one is redundant, because if you get to the second one, then it means that your first test has effectively returned a positive. And so the limitations on freedom, in my view, and on members on this side of the House, are not as great if you've already sort of gone across that first hurdle. So I think that it's unfortunate to hear from the new Minister that the government are not going to take up that suggestion by the Select Committee, because I thought actually it was something that members from across the House were keen to see actually implemented as part of that. There is one time limitation in existing statute, and that relates to identity, where a police officer can effectively hold someone at the roadside for up to 15 minutes before either having to release them or let them go, or basically charging them or arresting them, and that's for failing to being able to establish the identity of a driver. Now, even the Attorney-General, the Honourable Judith Collins, in her report on this bill indicated that anything above 15 minutes basically called into question this issue of the inability to detain, well, not inability, but what is an unreasonable period of time to detain someone. So I do hope that the government do see a way through this, and when we come to committee stage that they may change their mind to reflect the views that the Select Committee listened to and what it was that we were able to hear as well, because that certainly was an expectation from members to respond to the concerns that were raised by the Attorney-General. One of the other things that came up through the Select Committee was, and I do hope that this is not the case, is that procurement wishing to drive what the provisions are in the legislation. I would hope that that is not what this newfound position of the government is on that particular matter. It's really important that when this piece of legislation goes through the process, that we consider what needs to be in it, what needs to be out of it, and that is what drives procurement. I don't think it's appropriate, Madam Speaker, to have a situation where the decisions as to what is going to be in the bill or in the legislation or what is not is going to be driven by an ability to basically procure devices or otherwise, and that was made very clear through the Select Committee process. So at this stage we, I guess, tentatively look to support it, but we will reserve through the committee the whole stage, given the surprise position that the government have just sprung on the House in terms of not wishing to support the proposals that were outlined. I do hope that they reflect on that, and perhaps we can have a different outcome to make it more workable, more fair, and get some consensus across the House on what is a pretty important issue.
Here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact for the chat. The Attorney General is Judith Collins. So, and this is why I found it kind of funny when I was reading through her report, because her concerns were is that this bill was inconsistent with the Bill of Rights, in particular Section 21, which is the right to be secure against reasonable search and seizure. Section 22, the right to not be arbitrarily detained. And cannot be justified under Section 5 of the Bill of Rights Act. Basically, she basically pointed out that this bill, as it currently stands, you can't push this forward. So in Section 22 of the Bill of Rights Act, it affirms that everyone has the right to not be arbitrarily arrested and detained. What that means is that an arbitrary arrest is the arrest or detention of an individual in a case in which there is no likelihood or evidence that they've committed a crime against legal statute, or in which there's been no proper due process of law and order. So, I just find it really interesting that Judith Collins is like, yeah, actually, guys, this bill has got issues.
The interesting thing that goes around there is the Attorney General is one of those few cabinet positions that are allowed to speak out against cabinet.
Yes.
Or against the government. It's an unusual one, and that's considering because in New Zealand, along with a lot of constitutional monarchies where the Attorney General comes from within the elected MP ranks, the Attorney General does hold an odd, unusual position because they are in theory the country's top lawyer.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the Solicitor General also is probably, say, the other top lawyer of the country.
Mm-hmm.
But effectively, the political one is the Attorney General is the political top lawyer. And their job as Attorney General is to make sure that it does not breach things such as the Bill of Rights.
Yep.
Or other constitutional matters, which in our case, because we have an unwritten constitution, it's not quite as clear-cut. Because we have a hodgepodge of legal legislation and treaty that's in the mix, not a founding document as such.
Yep.
So that is where the Attorney General does end up in a very weird grey area. But there are also that one in there. I mean, it was something else was said on there. There was a particular local bill that got abandoned, which was in Rotorua, was to it took a quirk out of first past the post. And it basically ended up, and Wholesome Pledge went right after it using the one person, one vote rule. But the plurality perspective of that bill, which David Parker was the Attorney General at the time, the one person, one vote prerogative didn't work in there because the proportional representation of those on the Māori roll were out of whack with the general roll, even though the proposal bill would allow, Rotorua Lakes District Council to have 3 general ward seats, 3 Māori ward seats, 4 councillors at large. Everyone gets free votes for either the Māori ward or the general ward, 4 votes for councillors at large, and 1 vote for the mayor. And the Attorney General had to basically say, no, that doesn't fall within the one person, one vote provision or the proportional representation. Rotorua Lakes District Council has now, as from it's in the ballot research, they have 6 general ward councillors, 3 Māori ward councillors, and 1 rural ward councillor to get around that anomaly. Which in turn meant there was, which means if you're on the general ward, you get 6 ticks to vote, whereas if you're on the Māori roll or on the rural ward, you only get 3 or 1 in their respective areas. So it's really interesting, the whole thing. Let's get to my local MP, Julian Genter.
I'll start by congratulating the new minister on his role as Minister of Transport. Very exciting. Secondly, I want to acknowledge the hard work of the excellent Transport and Infrastructure Committee on this bill. And I do find that is an incredibly collegial and constructive committee. And I wouldn't have said that about all the committees I've sat on in my time in this House, now 13 years. I do have some history with this bill, having been Associate Minister of Transport responsible for road safety at the time that we first started looking into the possibility of doing this. Last term, we nonetheless opposed that bill finally after this submissions at Select Committee. And this bill amends that legislation. Now, one of the goals, I think, in addressing this, there's no question that cars are very dangerous. They're extremely dangerous machines. In fact, it's really interesting. I was looking at this infographic, which is quite astounding to me, the world's deadliest animals. People killed per year by shark, 4 people. By wolf, 10 people. 1,000 people killed by crocodiles. 475,000 killed by humans, intentionally. 725,000 killed by mosquitoes. So we compare that to sharks, which I know a lot of people are afraid of. 720. So mosquitoes would be the world's deadliest animal, except that nearly twice as many people are killed by car drivers or in car crashes. So oftentimes I think it's normal. Humans, we didn't evolve with cars, so we're much more worried about sharks and wolves and possibly being murdered. But people are far more, much more likely to die in a car crash, unfortunately. And I can understand that road safety was a huge priority for me, always has been, and was when I was the minister and developed the evidence-based road safety strategy and action plan, which was trying to address the biggest factors, because the reality is that most car crashes are not done on purpose. Most people are not killed on purpose in car crashes, the vast majority. However, people do make mistakes. And that's one of the reasons the alcohol testing regime is so important, because people are far more likely to make mistakes when they're under the influence of alcohol. There is no question. And they are more likely to make mistakes if they're impaired because of some sort of substance, be that a drug that is regulated under the Misuse of Drugs Act and is technically illegal, or whether it is a medicine that's been prescribed by a health practitioner. There are a whole range of substances that can impair people's ability while they're driving, and it's an incredibly important responsibility that if people are using a motor vehicle, that they're in the best possible state. Being incredibly fatigued will impair drivers. Indeed, a number of studies have shown that doctors after work, or even medical students, people who've been working 24 or 36-hour shifts with no sleep, were more likely to be in a seriously damaging car crash or a fatal car crash than people who are severely impaired by alcohol. So this legislation doesn't do anything about the fact that some people who drive when they're fatigued will be incredibly impaired and high risk. This legislation by itself cannot solve most car crashes, and will not, unfortunately. And the numbers that are being used, the statistics that have been cited by the government to say that drugs and alcohol are the single largest contributing factor, well, that's only because they've combined drugs and alcohol. If we split out drugs and alcohol, speed trumps both of them. So driving at a speed that is inappropriate for the conditions is more likely to influence, or is responsible for more fatal crashes in New Zealand than drugs separately or alcohol separately. Unfortunately, the biggest problem, I think, with the legislation and with this approach is that, unlike with alcohol, for most of these substances, presence of the substance in the blood or in saliva cannot be sufficiently correlated to impairment. And we do need a lot more research and work done on that, because it is important that there is some deterrent factor, that people don't believe they can use an impairing substance and then drive. It is really, really important that we do something about that. However, at the Select Committee, we heard from a number of submitters. The majority of submissions were opposed to the bill as it was introduced, and that was primarily due to this problem of the difficulty of reliably establishing impairment from either oral fluid or blood tests. So I'll quote the Law Society, which recommended that the bill not proceed, quoted the independent expert panel on drug driving in its submission. The use of oral fluid as a determining feature for immediate sanction raises significant issues. The independent expert panel on drug driving has documented a number of the issues, including the unreliability of drug concentration found in oral mucosa as related to the blood concentration, the pharmacodynamics, which significantly alter the amount of drug concentration in oral mucosa, and the link between impairment and blood drug concentration being much more widely known and studied than the oral drug concentration. So, and then we heard the same, from the Royal Australasian College of Physicians. Like, it's just not plausible. And I know it's easy to come in here and say this, but it's not plausible to say the reason for this legislation is because we're really concerned about road safety, and then completely ignore all the experts on every other aspect of road safety. The chief trauma surgeon and the New Zealand Medical Journal wrote extremely concerned, and a whole range of experts have criticized the last minister's policy on speed management as being completely not evidence-based and going to result in more people dying and being seriously injured. So I would accept that argument that people are really concerned about road safety if they were taking an evidence-based approach. And I can understand why many of the members in this House will support this legislation, because they do believe that doing something is better than doing nothing. However, the position of the Green Party is do least harm first. And based on the submissions, based on the expert evidence, based on the fact that we simply cannot establish impairment from the presence of the vast majority of these substances, we cannot support this legislation as it is proposed at second reading, and so we will not. And I just think, the most important thing is recognizing that yes, there is a problem. The question is the proposed solution actually going to address that problem? And at the very least, I do hope that the government will carry on with monitoring and evaluation, because while it is true that there are other jurisdictions that use oral drug testing to screen for illicit drug use and sometimes for pharmaceutical impairing drugs, there is no comprehensive evidence that suggests that has meaningfully reduced impaired driving in those countries, or that there's been a significant reduction in the number of people being harmed on the roads as a result of those regimes. If there were such evidence, I think it would be a lot easier for the Green Party to support this bill. And the most serious potential problem, I think, was raised in the New Zealand Drug Foundation submission on the bill, which I highly recommend people look at. And they do propose an enhanced model of impairment testing that would actually pick up impairment and not just presence. But there has been a recent study in Australia which demonstrated that when they tested for impairment of people using medicinal cannabis, that those people were not impaired, and yet they still had blood concentration levels that would have received an infringement or possibly even a criminal penalty of THC. So the big issue here is that THC is not like alcohol. And another big issue is there's a whole lot of different substances that are added together to talk about the drugs that are proven to influence fatal crashes in New Zealand. And not all of those drugs, in fact, the vast majority of them won't be screened for. Some of them can't be screened for with these oral fluid testing devices. So there'll really only be 1 or 2, maybe 3 substances tested for, and one that's definitely likely to be on that list is THC. People are using medicinal cannabis, and without having any ability to tell whether those people are actually impaired or not, because blood level and saliva level doesn't correlate to impairment in the same way that alcohol does. And that's why the Green Party will not be supporting this bill. Thank you.
The other one that can be quite interesting on that is the reintroduction of getting pseudoephedrine from the pharmacy. That would also potentially throw up a methamphetamine drug taking.
Quite possibly.
So, I'm not sure how many pharmacies actually signed up to actually resell that over the counter, but that's also something else that can come out there, that an over-the-counter medication can also trigger, a methamphetamine use.
There's not much I can really add on to what Julie and Gina said. So it is I personally think it's really annoying how drugs and alcohol are combined, but I do kind of understand the logic for why this is done. And this is because alcohol and drugs frequently co-occur. So people often, when they go driving, they might take their prescription medication, or they might take an illegal drug and then drink a bunch of alcohol with it, and then go speeding, which is another thing that happens, especially if you live out in a rural community. Boy, man, the amount of people I hear speeding. Boom.
Oh, and also, and you probably know about the recent announcement with Mike Butterick and Chris Bishop and Christopher Luxton, to save what will be 3 minutes. Matthew Clive Wilson, I think the name is. Dog and Lemon is the blog he runs. He said that you can sit there and have to spend on 110 k's. It's not going to stop the sleepy drivers and they're going head on into a truck because they fell asleep because they were forced to work a 12-hour shift at their work, because the employer keeps poorly rostering them or something like that. As he said, that the biggest cause of accidents are categorised as other.
Yep.
And he said the thing is, you have he said the biggest thing that will cut down road deaths is median barriers.
Yep.
But that is probably at the moment is probably not going to happen because the national philosophy is you can't do it because it can cause all sorts of things. And I mean this is evident in Tauranga on the road out to Katikati when they went to put some of these safety measures in. People are literally like breaking the law to get around it.
Yep.
And say, but now I have to drive an extra 8 kilometres because the new roundabout turnaround area is 4 kilometres up the road. Yep. Yeah, and it's like, but it's about risk elimination. And a lot of people don't see the risk elimination part. Like you could say, drive 4Ks up the road and drive 4Ks back, and that could actually be shorter than trying to turn right out of the intersection across 2 lanes of traffic at 80 or 100 kilometres an hour.
I just don't understand the logic here. Like, okay, we've got underpaid police. We've got police that are leaving for Australia. So where are you going to get the police from to do this testing? Secondly, you're increasing the speed limit.
Yeah.
You don't think that, you're going to add these two up together. And so what happens when you got like someone who's driving on a rural back road? It's like you got a lack of police. You got someone who's probably had a hoon somewhere, is on drugs and alcohol, and you're just going to end up with more crashes.
Well, I mean, on one of Simeon Brown's recent decisions, so I was speaking with Deputy Mayor of Wellington, Laurie Foon, today, and she didn't actually realise that. So Rintel Street is a street that recently has been lowered to 30 k's. In the original plan, prior to Simeon becoming minister, was that all the side streets that were dead end off it were all going to be 30 k's. Because Labor allowed the law to do it. Simeon Brown said, oh no, that's killing the economy. So let's have 50k speed limits to dead-end streets that have no time saving. And then people have gone out there because there's a big vendetta against a certain group of people against the council saying, oh, Simeon needs to bring in commissioners because the council's acting like idiots at the moment. But the councils are literally following Simeon's stupid law.
Oh, I'll tell you what another stupid law is. The partial strike deduction bill.
Oh,
that's stupid. And also not allowing workers to work from home. That would save a lot of crashes, more people.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That actually is a good point there. That would actually save crashes because if you have, say, a situation where someone lives in the Wairarapa, works in Wellington, drives because the public transport system doesn't quite work within their structure of their job, because the Wairarapa trains, you got 3 in the morning, 3 in the evening, and 2 in the middle of the day each way. But you don't, apart from Friday night, you've got nothing beyond 6:30 at night. Mm-hmm. So if you're, say, doing, a 10 to 8 shift or something like that, you're going to have to drive over the Rimutakas both ways. I mean, hey, you could park car up our train station and catch a train the last leg of the journey, but you've still got to drive over that hill.
Public transport's important. Encouraging carpooling is important. This is how we reduce accidents on the road. Make sure people are not driving when they're tired because they've had to do an extra couple of hours at work. It's just, enforcing workers' rights. It's all it all trickles down. It all impacts each other.
Yeah. Let's see what Cameron Luxton's got to say because this seat ain't a speech warmer.
I'd like to thank the new Minister for Transport for his introduction to this bill. It was a little surprising, some of the stuff we heard. I also echo the previous committee members who have spoken to thank Dr. Helen Pelosi at ESR for the sound advice she's given us, the tour of the facility during the select committee process on a select committee, which I also believe is an extremely collegial and helpful place to be discussing these issues, ably chaired by Andy Foster, but the entire committee I think works in quite a good way. The committee went out to ESR and I think that trip settled a lot of issues people had about privacy. One of the issues that I was concerned about initially was the use of samples for other things beyond driving, like some kind of Misuse of Drugs Act offence, but we've been assured that is not the case with this bill and that won't be a part of it. The thresholds, Madam Speaker, the thresholds were designed, we heard in committee, to be a proxy for impairment, as the previous speaker, member has just alluded to. It's not an easy thing to judge impairment as a proxy with saliva levels, because as the research is being conducted now to come up with these levels, there needed to be a bit more leeway given to getting devices that can actually measure these things. I do have to say I was rather disappointed in committee to have the advice from the officials that we can't give you decent options around time that it will take to do these tests, because we don't have procurement, and procurement's going to have to follow the law. I was deeply uncomfortable with that. I think that we should be expecting better in committee. That said, I should outright say that ACT will be supporting this second reading, in case there is any doubt, but there are some issues in there that we need to be clear about. I do feel that given the advice that we received in committee, we can be confident that there is a good correlation as a proxy between saliva and blood levels and impairment, although not perfect, and that is being developed, so I would like to see that progress a bit further as the Minister in charge approves these devices. We also heard, Madam Speaker, in committee about the operationalisation of the drug testing regime, and the word random was used. Random being used to say, when you hear the word random, you think it would just be picking up any old driver who's cruising down State Highway in New Zealand. But actually, the police said that they're going to be operating that testing in not exactly a random way. It will be systematic and about proportionate risk to areas, times of day, and events that are occurring in that area. So I think it's important that people, when they hear that this will be applied in a random way, understand that it's not random in the dictionary definition sense. It is actually going to have a more strategic approach given to the way that's dealt with. The Attorney General, Madam Speaker, also raised issues with a Section 7 report, as she is required in some ways to do when these sort of issues arise. And there were some issues that actors are somewhat uncomfortable with and do want to see fleshed out a bit with the Minister at Committee of the Whole. Those include the right to be secure against unreasonable search and seizure and the right not to be arbitrarily detained. The first one about the unreasonable search and seizure is about, if you're going to someone based on a random screening test, that should have quite a high bar before you go and look at taking a sample of someone's blood or saliva in this case. I think that this is an issue, this being drug driving and the danger that imposes on New Zealanders and their families, that to my judgment warrants a regime for drug driving testing. It's pretty hard to deny that someone who is on drugs can, at certain levels, be a big danger to themselves when operating any type of machinery, and a vehicle travelling down the road at anywhere between 10 and 100 km an hour can always be dangerous. So I think it's important that we weigh up the freedom of New Zealanders to not have arbitrary blood samples taken, but also the freedom of New Zealanders to expect to be able to go about their lawful business without the danger that is imposed on them by people who are operating in a completely dangerous way on the road. So I think there is a test there that is passed, although I think the Attorney General's Section 7 report on that matter. The other matter that the Attorney General raised was about the arbitrary detention. How long can someone be stopped on the side of the road required to give a sample? Now, and this, as I alluded to earlier in my speech here, we didn't get a lot of advice about time from officials, and I think that the committee should have been able to expect a bit more in that way. But, we as a committee decided that, on balance, we need to be moving in a direction that is going to provide New Zealanders freedoms to move and freedoms to be the right to be not arbitrarily detained. And so we came to a balance, and the committee's commentary reflects that. It also reflects that there is a time that someone can be expected to be held on the road in New Zealand law without any reason, and it was alluded to earlier by Pangi Utakere. It's Section 114 of the Land Transport Act, which sets out a 15-minute limit for an enforcement officer to hold someone on the side of the road for the purposes of gathering information about who that person is before they have to either release them or move on to another piece of legislation. So we put that in the commentary for all to see, and I think we could expect to see something be done when this bill comes up to review, because it will be reviewed. There is a statutory review of the bill is a good idea. I think a new scheme like this needs to be well checked, and the committee looked at when that should happen, and we've given some advice about bringing some of that time forward to make sure it can be completed in time to check that this regime is actually working. Madam Speaker, the thresholds, the previous speaker from the Green Party mentioned that there's not a lot of science about these thresholds. Well, there are Australian New Zealand standards that are operating in this area. So there is science developing. There is agreements that are happening between New Zealand scientists, Australian scientists from many states in Australia coming together and working out how this scheme can, how these levels can be tested, correlated with impairment. So there is actually a standard there. And I think that giving a level of accuracy that New Zealanders can feel confident is not taking away the rights of their fellow New Zealanders when they are going about their lawful business, but also giving the people the right to feel safer on the road, because there's too many stories of people in New Zealand dying on our roads needlessly, and the pain that causes on all sides is quite traumatic. So I think it's something that has to be weighed up, Madam Speaker, when it comes to this. There's one more piece in here, Madam Speaker, which I'd like to touch on, which is the accompanying an officer to a place to be tested. Where the committee had a good discussion about this. The wording that we've come up to in a commentary sort of reflects the conversation, and that is that we do not expect that this will be used as a way to get somebody who has been stopped for the purpose of a random roadside oral fluid screening test and removed from that location to a distant location. It's fair enough if the police stop someone and say, look, this is not a safe place to perform this test, accompany me over the berm here or off the road into somewhere that's a bit more safer. That is a fair enough thing, but the wording I felt was a little bit, and I'm no lawyer, and this house is full of very capable lawyers, but the wording to me seemed a bit too loose. As in, you could say, look, I suspect you of drug driving as an officer, and I'd like you to accompany me to the station where we have a machine which has been procured, which is not transportable. I just don't think that's something that New Zealanders would expect. And we were given advice in committee that that's not what would happen. It would be used for the safety of the person being checked and the officer involved, not for a process of removing that individual off to a distant location. And I just wanted to make sure that was on the record, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all this said, I think this is something that time has come. There does need to be a way for New Zealanders to be confident that 74% of New Zealanders don't feel they can get away with drug driving on New Zealand roads. That is a thing that a state that's looking after its citizens should be concerned about. And I think this bill is weighing these up. There's more to be done, but I look forward to having a conversation at Committee of the Whole. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because imagine if, say, you end up on the desert road at the Three Sisters and you have to be taken to a police station and you got Wairu, which is probably 20 minutes in one direction, 20 to 30 in one direction. You've got Oranga in the other 20 to 30 minutes direction. That is quite a long distance. And then what happens if you have a negative test? Do the police officers drive you back to that place, which potentially could put an hour? Now, if you're on driving restricted hours, such as in truck driving, that's quite a big jump. Now, I will be honest, cops don't typically willy-nilly pull trucks over on the side of the road for random things. They tend to let way stations do that job. So if there's an alert, they tend to flag it, and they basically flag it to stop it at an open way station or to flag the alert then. But, there are all sorts of things there. But, like, put it that way. Say you get stopped in the middle of the Three Sisters on the desert road, that is quite a big distance to the nearest police stations, and that's just where the nearest civilization is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the moment, talking about the randomization of these tests. Yeah. So at the moment, the police can only ask you to take a drug impairment test if they suspect your ability to drive is compromised. But under this bill, it would become legal for the police to conduct random saliva-based roadside tests on any driver without suspecting impairment. So this is the same way how police currently conduct random alcohol breath tests.
Yeah.
The issue is that this bill will not just test for impairment, it will also test for the presence of drugs. Yes. And how long drugs can stay in your system depends on what was taken and how fast your metabolism is. So, for example, THC in saliva can actually remain in your system for a couple of days. Amphetamines can also be detectable in your saliva for 24 hours up to several days after dosing. Yeah. So these drugs can stay in your system even after the effects have worn off, and this means that people may be able to drive without impairment, but the drug will still be detectable.
And it doesn't address, like, if we remember from the last time we covered this bill, which was Select Me, when we had Rachel Ford on the show. Yep. Like, the biggest one was about fatigue.
Yes. Yeah, fatigue's the big one.
Like, fatigue could sprout more drug impairment symptoms than actually being on the drugs. Yeah. And, I brought up the point in that one, and I know some people got upset with me. It is important that testing is conducted, but, we also got to have standards that protect people. Make sure that they are still able to go to work and stuff like that. Like, as I say, if you ended up, like, in your situation, if you got told, sorry, you can't drive for 12 hours, like, you can't even sit down there and get beyond the 100k sign leaving your town.
Yeah, it's like
it's not like me, who I can walk straight to the road, and I've got three high frequency bus routes right by there, and I might be waving at Julianne, who's riding on a bike. Yeah, in a rural community like where I live, let's take my sister for an example. She's injured her back. She might have to take tramadol. Okay, but she has to go to work. It's in her job's a factory job. It's in Masterton, right? Yeah. What happens if she gets pulled over by the police? Yeah. She's a responsible driver. She doesn't have a criminal record at all. Probably drives a Suzuki Swift, not a boy racer car.
No, she's not driving a big giant ute. She's driving like a Suzuki Alto, right?
Oh,
yeah. Just a little car, or like a Honda Civic.
Yeah, does it have 3 or 4 cylinders?
Ooh, I'm pretty sure it's 3 cylinders. It's a 600cc engine. It's just a tiny guy.
What year?
Oh, shit. I have to get the year. I don't know, but...
Does it have 2 letters or 3 letters in the number plate?
Hold on. Are you saying this is one of yours?
No. So pre-2000, most of the car number plates had 2 letters in them. Post-2000, they have 3.
Okay, I think it's post-2000.
Yeah.
The car's out the front yard. I'd have to run out there.
Yeah. It's a little 600. See, I used to drive around in 800cc Suzuki Altos, and the motor that was in them was called an F8B. And the reason why it was B was the 3-cylinder model, A was the 4-cylinder model.
Ah, okay.
And I mean, these were carburetors. Now, I mean, to be honest, fuel injectors so much easier, car start much easier. Carburetors were a pain in the butt on a wet, moist day. And I can tell you right now, when I lived in Kandala, it was a pain in the butt starting a carburetor car. But I mean, your sister ain't driving a boy racer's car. Your sister is driving a car that probably only does 70 k's up Mount Bruce instead of 120.
Yeah. So I know there is a bill that says you can defend yourself if you've got a prescription or something. But let's be real here. Sometimes when you have a chronic pain condition or you've had an injury, okay, and this happens in my household. I have medications from when I had to go through surgery and I have chronic pain, right? She doesn't have time to go to the doctors to get a script. Sometimes you just got to take what your sister has got, right? Take a small dose of that to work so you can get some money. Yeah, this happens. This is pretty common in rural communities because we don't have access to 24/7 hour doctors. So you take a little bit of this medication so you've got enough in the system to go do some mahi. In the town that you work for. What happens if you get called by the police? You don't have a defense, right? You're in agony, you're in pain. What if you have to drive to the hospital?
And that just got you to the hospital door.
Yeah, and that got you enough.
This is a box of Panadol. It lives it's in the ballot camera toolbox. I can tell you right now, Nick used these more than I did.
Yes.
And it was just because the fact, he had Panadol at home, but he knew I carried Panadol on me.
Yep.
Like I didn't have lamotrigine, which is one of his medications he's prescribed, because guess what? I'm not prescribed that. I wouldn't want to be either. But that's the thing there. It's like, I've had that thing in there. I also have another one in my coffee cart float box of Panadol. And I can tell you right now, people who've worked with me have used it as well. You won't find the strong medications. You won't find my prep in there, but you will find, say, the Panadol stuff that sits there. And I mean, my GP knows that I'll probably get a script, and he knows I throw it in the box in there. But he says, Panadol used safely, isn't going to sit there and cause any problems. As long as you sit there and stick to recommendations and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in situations where I might have a sibling that, because they all do sports, they do strongman in particular. Yeah. They may have injured their back. Okay, they've got to drive to the hospital. I can't go with them, but they've got to drive to the hospital. And an ambulance, what the fuck is an ambulance?
It might be deemed low priority.
Yeah, low priority. So what do? You go, okay, here, take some.
What happens if Steve's mother has a heart attack in Pongaroa? Exactly. I can tell you, who's going to get taken to the hospital first?
Exactly. So it's like, okay, you're able to drive if you've got some medication on board. Take a bit of tramadol and drive yourself down there.
Yeah.
Okay? Imagine if there's a drug checkpoint. Get out of the car, you can't drive 12 hours. Oh, I need to go to the hospital. I've got to, it's like, no, if you've got a prescription. So, yeah, I can picture this really impacting rural communities quite negatively.
Yeah, and especially if you get a cop who wants to I actually be honest, rural cops don't get hot-headed. But if you got a cop who was hot-headed, who was just trying to flex their muscles to show who's boss, that could potentially cause all sorts of problems.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully the cops in my area are really nice people. But we've all come across a dickhead cop.
Oh yeah. And even the police know. Yeah, we've got.
Yeah, they know who the dickheads are on the force.
Yeah. Well, considering one of them they do consider a deserter, who is our current Minister of Police.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Let's get to Uncle Andy.
Yep.
Speaker, thank you. It's a pleasure to rise to support and to speak to this bill, which is an important step forward for road safety for all New Zealanders. It's also nice to be able to stand and also acknowledge the speeches that have gone before from my Select Committee colleagues, and thank you for your collegial both speeches, but also the collegial work we've done not only on this bill but on other pieces of legislation and other pieces of work. Madam Speaker, I wanted to start off with a few thanks. And first of all, I just wanted to thank our wonderful officials from the Office of the Clerk, Jonathan Harris, Femke Yaga, Louis Munt and Chris Cunningham, who give us fantastic support all the way through. I wanted to also thank the Ministry of Transport officials and the police, who helped us immensely with a lot of very, very good advice. And also, as you've heard, Dr. Helen Paulson, who we called in the ESR, the Environmental Science and Research, to provide that expert advice which we absolutely needed to support our work. I wanted also, Madam Speaker, to thank the submitters. Some argued for the bill, some argued against it, some raised concerns, and we tried to work our way carefully through that. I particularly also, at this point in time, want to thank two of our committee members, Tom Rutherford and Grant McCullum, who, as a result of a reshuffle, we're going to lose to the committee. But I want to thank you for your work both on this, but also right the way through the last year and a bit. So thank you very much. And particularly, I wanted to talk across the House there and to Labour, to Arena Williams and Tangi Utakiri, and thank you for the collegial way that you particularly worked through those issues around the length of time of detention, because they were issues which several of us, Cam Luxton as well, myself, we were concerned about as issues which we needed to work through, and I thought we landed in a good place. It's going to be interesting to see how the Minister continues to work through that, because we'll continue to advocate in the direction which we think it should go. I was disappointed in the Green Party's alternative or minority opinion. We pressed the Green Party several times during the Select Committee to say, well, you say you're going to vote against this, you say you're going to oppose this, can you tell us why? And we only actually got the why when the minority opinion came out, and I think that's not good enough. I think that needs to be done earlier. I think that is the sensible way to go, and it's the collegial and appropriate way to go, because we might have been able to work through some of those issues as well. Madam Speaker, drug driving is a significant safety problem on New Zealand roads. And just to give you some numbers, in calendar year 2023, 64 fatalities where drugs were detected in the driver. That's drugs alone. Another 32 where drugs and alcohol were detected, and just for context, 59 where alcohol alone was detected. So between those, 155 of the 341 total road deaths in 2023 where drugs and or alcohol were involved. So it is a significant issue, Madam Speaker. It doesn't mean that they caused the crash, but it does mean that they were part of the crash, and most crashes have multiple causes. This bill is all about deterrence, because at the moment there is no deterrence. This has been one of those things, and I've had a long history in road safety. This has been one of those things which has been a bit of the holy grail of how can we do something to try and disincentivise people from consuming drugs and then driving. The Labour government had a go at this in 2022 with the Land Transport Drug Driving Amendment Act, which gave police the power to stop people and to administer oral fluid tests. The problem there was it didn't work, because the bar was set so high, because you had to have something that was reasonably accurate, because the roadside test was the thing that condemned you or didn't condemn you. The difference with this piece of legislation is that the roadside test is only a screening, whereas the actual determination of whether you actually get fined, whether you lose, whether you have demerit points, is done by a laboratory test. And what was quite clear from despite the comments which were made by Julianne Genter, was from ESR, they said quite clearly, we cannot stand behind the accuracy of the screening test, the oral fluid test at roadside. You might get 5%, up to 5% plus or minus of false positives or false negatives, but we can stand behind the laboratory test, just as we can stand behind the laboratory test for blood with alcohol testing. And that is a significant thing. That is why it was so important to get that advice. There is an issue with the lights. There is an issue with the roadside screening, which we did consider. It's the energy crisis, which we did consider, and that is that if you fail 2 tests at the roadside, then you can be banned from driving for 12 hours. It's no fine, etc. So it is a significant inconvenience, and we did weigh that up. But the strong advice was that there is a safety issue there, and the safety issue outweighs the inconvenience issue, and the likelihood of getting 2 effectively false positives is pretty small. So we thought that was a reasonable position. We also had quite a discussion about prescriptions, and should that be a defence? And in a way it is a defence, but it doesn't prevent you being barred for that 12 hours. Because of course if you use it in line with medical prescriptions, it's not an illegal thing. That seems to be quite reasonable. But of course you still, if you have failed those 2 tests, then there's the ability for police officers to ban you from driving for 12 hours for safety reasons. I want to talk just briefly about the powers given to the Minister. So like Labour's 2022 legislation, this bill gives the Minister of Police the power, and in this case in consultation with the Minister of Transport and the Minister of Science, to approve devices. And you heard the Minister of Transport, new Minister of Transport, who outlining some of the changes that the committee recommended. So the Minister will approve the device, and the bill includes new criteria, but it still leaves discretion to the Minister. And I would suggest that discretion that is exercised with care. So the discretion is to approve the drug or drugs or drug families that the device can screen for, to approve the concentration levels. Now, we've already heard from, I think again it was Julianne Genter, about concentration levels. Now, those are set largely by standards. Those standards are argued through by both our experts in New Zealand and the Australian experts. So there's a lot of science, a lot of collaboration which goes behind setting those standards. They are a proxy. So the presence of the drug is a proxy for recent use, which is regarded as a proxy for impairment. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But getting it perfect, we will never do anything. And that's probably the reality of it. So there are quite a lot of good safeguards there. The Minister must also consider the accuracy of the device and the ability to calibrate that device appropriately. The drugs that can be tested, there's only a limited range of drugs that can be tested. They must be from a schedule of 25 listed drugs. They must have a standard, which I've just talked about, or an equivalent to that standard. And some of the rarely used drugs, and it is by and large the rarely used drugs, are not, they haven't got a standard yet, so they're unlikely to be tested. But because they're only a tiny fraction of the problem, that is not a big deal. Madam Speaker, it's not a perfect regime. It's just like the blood alcohol regime is not perfect. Different people, different body sizes, different metabolisms, they all respond differently. I did an exercise when I was the president of the New Zealand Traffic Institute some years ago. The police organised, and they had all sorts of different road safety practitioners and other people there, and they tested basically. They plied us with alcohol and food, and they tested us throughout an evening. I'm sure we didn't drive home. They tested us throughout an evening, but it's really interesting to see how differently different people responded and what the effect, for example, of food, rest, whatever it might have been, was on them. And so drugs will be just the same. The effect on people's bodies will be different for different people. The BORA issues. The BORA is really, really important because my view is that we have far too few checks and balances on the power of government anyway. The concerns which were raised by the Legislative Committee and the Attorney General, we've already heard about those. The first thing, though, is to say is those concerns were only about the first test. Once you've failed the first test, then those concerns go away because there is then good cause to say that there is a potential issue there. But the Attorney General raised issues about the inconsistency with search and seizure, the inconsistency with detention. And it's very, very clear that the issue of randomness is a problem to the Attorney General. And if I might give 2 quotes there, what she said is the more invasive the procedure, the greater the expectation of privacy. And so this is a more invasive procedure than blood testing is because you're given saliva and you're also being detained for longer because it's just a longer process. The intrusion on an individual's privacy that arises from the taking of a bodily sample for the first, and I stress the first, oral fluid screening test appears disproportionate where there is no basis, and this is the important, no basis to suspect the individual driving is driving under the influence of an impairing drug. So this whole thing of randomness is a really, really important thing. And the reality is, and I think Cam Luxon pointed that out very well, the police are not likely to do this randomly. They're not going to drive along, go say, well, that white car, we're going to pull that white car over for no reason whatsoever. They're going to take account of the location, the situation, is there an event going on, whatever it might be. They might be in a situation where they've already tested the person for blood, and they say, well, maybe we might want to test them also, for alcohol, maybe we might also want to test them for drugs because we are seeing an issue there. And so there is the opportunity to do that. Madam Speaker, I'm going to run out of time here, but I do want to say thank you again to all the people who contributed to this, and I commend this bill to the House.
I mean, look, yeah, that would be a justification. If you're at an event and you've picked up someone who's got alcohol in their system, yes, drug testing would be justified as well. But the problem is that the bill's not asking for that. He's saying, oh, this is what a cop can do, and it's all happy-go-lucky.
But a cop can have a set of discretions. That's fine, but it's not saying, can that be used in addition to an alcohol breath screening test?
Is there... I don't know if there's anything in the bill that could prevent this, and this has been bothering me for a while, but let's say you want an excuse to pull over someone. Yeah. Or you say, that guy looks like Rangi, who might have stole something, I don't know. And it's like, okay, I need a justification.
Well, that car could be a bit of a rust bucket because it's got a shit ton of rust kill on the front of it, being my van, which is nicknamed at the moment by friends called the Brown Polka Dots because I put rust kill for the warrant. I just haven't painted over it yet. I mean, it was 2.5 months ago, but still, and that could potentially go, oh, this car's a bit dodgy. And so that may do that, and or something like try to find a reasoning to try and pull someone over. So that could be something in there. I mean, I know with the paper run, one of the things I've learned is, scare across the road, sits there and triggers the cops. But then as soon as they find out you're the paper run person, they drive straight off embarrassed.
I don't know if there's like anything in the bill. I didn't see anything in the bill that provided that provision, like unlawful, pulling over someone, just because they look like someone else.
What protections are there? As I said, I remember there was 3 times, approximately 3 weeks apart, by the same police car that was pulling me over in the same street. Well, actually, the 3rd time he went to pull me over, he was about to pull over and then just zoomed off. Mm-hmm. So I think he probably triggered, oh shit, I recognise this number plate. Because like 2 different ones, he went and pulled over, but didn't pull beside me, drove his car and then wound down his passenger's window and asked me questions. No breath testing, nothing. Mm-hmm. But I think it was like the 3rd time he did it. It was just kind of like, oh, actually, this ain't worth touching. Like, I actually had a friend who was trying to see if that was actually flagged as a report, because the fact it kept happening in the same street in Miramar within the same half an hour in the morning.
But Andy does bring up an interesting point, and I would have liked to have seen this in the bill. That because the stats show that alcohol is often combined with drugs. Yes, right? People they often go together. Yeah. That if you do detect get a positive result, for a breathalyzer test, I think that could be a really good justification in the bill to go, okay, now we're going to do the drug test to make sure that you're not impaired as well. On top of that,
you haven't got the double-edged sword.
Yep.
Potentially. But I don't know what, I mean, the alcohol charge would be the much more clear cut one in a criminal sense to charge someone, whereas the drug testing one's a little bit more flimsy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more, so, you know, there's a lot more guesswork in that aspect of a drug driving charge to a drink driving charge. Mm-hmm. There is a difference between, you know, there's a much more clear cut, but there's a lot more evidence, science behind the behind drink driving, because we've got 30 years worth of research around it, and what different impairment levels and what different breath reading ratings. I mean, the part I still actually laugh about was when Billy Weepoo, who had 12 beers, was still under the drink driving limit.
Yeah, and this is why I say that, okay, if you detect alcohol in the breathalyzer, having using that as a justification for drug testing could be really good. Because
I mean, that was the good thing about this. Is like, you know, it's a shame John Campbell doesn't have Campbell Live on anymore. Yeah. But this was one of his stories that actually they did. It was really interesting just going through it. But like, there was, I think it was Greg Murphy, like watched the video footage of driving on the Hampton Downs Raceway, and it's just like, yeah, no, mate, he should not be driving on the road based on that. Wait, he's under the drink driving limit? Yeah. That's just ridiculous.
But it's like, okay, you're under the limit, right? But you've got alcohol detected in your system. Now we need to make sure that you haven't taken drugs, which in combination with the alcohol can impede your ability to drive. Yeah. And this is why also it might motivate you to speed or whatever. So I think, you know, Andy makes a good point. Too bad that point's not in the bill.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what was it Maria Mano Kapakingi's got to say.
I'm not sure what to make of the fact that my very first speech this year is on the matter of drug driving, but here we are. In fact, can I just say, we discussed this just this morning at our caucus, the importance or the priority we give to kaupapa that come to this House, namely in the form of bills. And therefore, which of these bills impacts on whānau and mokopuna and tupuna, and how will we address them and prioritise them? You heard this morning that Dame Tariana Tari spoke on all kaupapa, that she could wherever and whenever she could, whether that be in this House or in the corridors or in select committees. So here it is. Firstly, mihi to the new Minister, Chris, he's not here, but just to say, and I didn't mean that as a thing, other than to say that the fact that I'm leaving the committee has got nothing to do with the fact that there is a new minister. I know. Anyway, Andy, that's out there now. But also to acknowledge Andy and my colleagues, I think that's the right description, but to say that it has been a very, apart from my first year in the House, just the first year in this particular committee, and the determination and all the work that was provided, not only on this pake, Madam Speaker, but all the issues that came to transport and infrastructure. So, Andy, kami te mihi kia koe. Not an easy thing to corral such an exciting group of people. So here it is from us. Of course, drunk or drug drivers are dangerous and need to be taken off the road. Of course, we want whānau to feel safe and secure on the road when they're driving, when they're pedestrians or passengers. I want that, and so does Pāti Māori. I don't quite have the same confidence, Andy, you were just expressing around police won't do just a random thing, and I'm not being mean about police, certainly not after this morning's first speeches, Madam Speaker, and certainly some of my own and Penny's relations who are part of that police force. But to say this, there isn't the same trust that certainly Māori communities have in that regard. I come to the negative implications of this bill, and where that harm often falls. Last year, you would have heard the exciting speech provided by Takuta Ferris, not the one that you're thinking about right now, but anyway. He stood and spoke to the implications that this bill will have on rangatahi Māori, and particularly its impact on our young Māori men. He stated that the Human Rights Commission in 2019 identified that when it comes to low-level convictions, Māori are overrepresented. When it comes to criminal convictions for possession of cannabis, Māori are overrepresented. When it comes to our prison populations, Māori again are overrepresented. In the context of drug driving offences, the impact that this bill will have on our communities will be devastating. Additionally, this bill is hypocritical to the fact that drug abuse and addictions are treated as a health issue in this country. Yet here we have a bill that criminalises these very things. To the House I ask, which is it? A health issue that deserves care, or a crime that deserves punishment? Pāti Māori knows exactly who suffers and who benefits, depending on the answer in which a minister or an MP may choose to give. Everyone in this room knows that driving infringements are a gateway to the criminal justice system for our young Māori men, and that this bill will only accelerate the rate at which our tāne Māori are incarcerated. When we know that despite being 20% of the population, Māori are now among the most incarcerated people on the planet, then the debate is always and will always be about the impact that the actions of government have upon Māori people.
We, Te Pāti Māori, reject my working relationships, despite my working relationships with the Select Committee, which I hope I continue to have. We reject this bill that it will only contribute to already existing pipeline into prison for our rangatahi Māori. And we only seek to further marginalise our people and exacerbate discrimination and inherently racist system. Tēnā koe te pika, tēnā tātou te whare.
Yep, she brings up the same points, kind of like a similar vein of points that I spoke about when it comes to rural communities.
Yeah.
You know, she's bringing it up though in the context of weed and marijuana, but you get Māori people who don't want to go on prescription medication, so you know they might take THC or whatever to deal with things like depression, anxiety, or pain management, and those people are going to get caught because it's how do you get a prescription for that stuff without paying an arm and a leg?
Exactly. And do you get a supportive doctor? Yeah,
it's like again, refer to earlier video once this video is edited. Which video did I make that point about with the rural stuff?
Was it Cameron Luxton or was it?
It might have been Cameron actually.
Yeah. I don't think it was part of Uncle Andy.
Anyway, watch all the videos. You'll find it. Again, Māori, it's like, who tend to live in rural communities and work labouring jobs, are more prone to injuries, underpaid, or get less pay compared to Pākehā people who might work a white collar job or whatever. Yada yada yada. We've all heard this before. But either way, those people are probably going to end up more in prison because again, they tend to be more they tend to rely more or tend to share drugs and stuff like that more often than Pākehā people, yada yada.
Okay, let's see what Ricardo Mendes March has got to say. The guy who got told to go back to Mexico, according to Shane Jones, but won't tell Rima Narco to go back to Australia.
Ricardo Menendez March.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, I think it's been really clear that everybody in this House thinks road safety is an issue that needs addressing, but I think the problem lies in how we choose to do so. And the Green Party has been really clear that we need to take an evidence-based approach that centres the research and lived experiences of people. And if we were to go using that, we would know that the answers often will lie in things like reducing speed limits, so making a road safer to use, and it includes things like greater awareness from the public about impaired driving and the impacts that it has on people. I think to me there's an issue that this bill is trying to address, which is the impairment that often comes because of the use of drugs, alcohol notwithstanding, as we do have a regime already for that. The challenge, I think that, and Julianne Gentry has already expressed on our behalf, some of those challenges lies in that this bill feels more like an experiment rather than something genuinely grounded on the best available evidence on, for example, whether there is a strict correlation between, for example, THC is one substance that's been used as an example in someone's blood or saliva, and then levels of impairment. That correlation does exist in other substances such as alcohol, which is why the regime that we have had has proven more effective in terms of addressing issues that come from impairment due to substance use. I don't believe, and certainly nor does the submitters, who are experts on these issues, that the kits that we have available to do testing, A, are accurate enough, at least the first one that is used before going to the laboratory, nor B, that we've developed the technology that will ensure that there is a very direct correlation with the results that are being given by these tests and then levels of impairment. I have heard members from the other side talk about things like the fact that they are developing technologies that they will hope will improve this level of accuracy and reporting. But I think if that is the case, if this is an area that is still being developed, I don't see the need to continue moving forward with this bill without actually getting to a place where the tools that we have at our disposal to curtail impaired driving are there to actually guarantee the safety of our communities. And so it's concerning to have a bill that may make people feel safer without actually doing so. And for the people who have been injured or have lost loved ones because of road accidents, and I've certainly been in my share of a handful of car crashes myself, I think of the fact that, as a passenger, to clarify, that this bill actually does not do many people who have been affected by issues of road safety justice. The previous speaker also mentioned issues around interactions with the police. And we can't deny, because we have had multiple reports around how some people have described the systemic targeting of police to specific communities, mainly Pacifica, Māori, Black people, that the way that this bill is designed will inevitably entrench that systemic discrimination that exists. And this, in some ways, actually is counterproductive to a public health approach to substance use, because actually what we want to create are communities that are aware of the dangers of driving while impaired, and then we create fear amongst our communities on how they will be targeted, we will actually end up having the worst of both worlds. A regime that does not follow best available evidence nor communities that feel empowered to have genuine conversations with the peers around the dangers of driving while impaired. So again, the Greens won't be supporting the bill as it is. We do look forward to new technology, to evidence that allows us to have a regime that keeps our community safe, because that is what our communities are calling for and what they deserve. So with that, I will end my contribution, and I look forward to finally having a debate on both road safety and drug use that is centered on evidence.
Oh no, asking for evidence, that's woke. We should deport him back to Mexico. No, don't do that. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean that. I'm not being serious. That was a joke. You can stay. You're great, Ricardo.
He's a New Zealand citizen. It's not like he can exactly be deported, but then he's also a Mexican citizen. And at the moment, he, as an MP, he has a diplomatic passport.
Yeah, no, Ricardo, you can stay. I will be more than happy to deport Shane Jones out of Parliament.
Yeah, out of Parliament, because I think that's as far as you can do.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see that Shane Jones was talking about how he'd like to do a boxing match against Ricardo? And I just laughed as someone who does boxing. I'm like, you wouldn't last a round, my guy. Ricardo would just run around you and he'd be gone.
There's a lot of things that people do not know about Ricardo, because there's a lot of things he's kind of kept a bit more private. You know, and you know, so you never know. He could actually be, you know, a boxing ring champion against Shane Jones.
He's from Mexico. They know how to scrap. That's for sure. Yeah. So you know,
I think he's a bit too polite for that, but yeah.
I don't know, man. Okay. So.
Yeah, I mean, he was always hard on Winds workers, though. But I mean, hey, you know, I'm hard on Winds workers as well. Yeah, the only people I know who are soft on Winds workers are those who don't understand the system and who thinks they follow the law to the letter every day.
So yeah, I mean, he is right. We do need community education, more public transport, all that good stuff. Basically, less people that have to drive to work, and the more stuff we have in place that incentivizes them to go take public transport or carpool or whatever is a good thing. We can reduce people, you know, having to go to the bloody pub after work and getting drunk and then taking a bunch of drugs and driving home or whatever.
Yeah. Do this at Scottswell. Let's see what Grant McCallum, who some people rate as dodgy.
Okay.
Before I enter into this very, very important debate, quickly acknowledge the people of Magnified, what's been going on there. I've spent the last 2 days being there. It's been pretty tough. Acknowledge people who had their homes devastated, and I'm thinking of them. I'm sure that the House is too, and wish them all the best. Right, so I'd like to begin thanking the chair of this committee and the other members of the committee. It has been a very collegial committee, and it's rather ironic on this day as I rise to speak on this bill. It'll be the last day I rise as a member of the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee, as I've now moved on to another committee. But I'd like to thank the other people for working for it. It has been a very constructive discussion and debate within the committee. I think it's important to also acknowledge and thank all the officials, in particular Dr. Helen Paulson, we had a fascinating day out at ESR, seeing how the processes and watching how that process worked, and it gave us all a level of confidence and professionalism of the saliva testing process. The question, I think we've got to remind ourselves, why are we doing this? What is the why? Well, the why is very simple. It's about road safety. It's about so people have increased, lessen the chances of people getting hurt and killed on our roads. That is the reason. And we've heard the stats about the correlation with drug and alcohol and drug and drug driving. I think there's a classic example, and it's not just, we all immediately think about marijuana or pee when we talk about these issues. Recently in Australia, there was a horrific bus crash. A group of people going to a wedding, I think it was from memory. 10 people were killed. The driver was over the limit on tramadol, addicted to tramadol. And I think that is a timely reminder of why this sort of legislation is so important. Yes, there are elements in there that might not be absolutely perfect and give you a 100% result, but it's that balance between the safety of the community and the individual's rights, which brings me to the Bora report. And that's the way up. I'm personally very comfortable, and I know that and the government is comfortable and overall with the fact that the safety of the population, people driving on the road, overrides the concerns of the Bora report. The other thing that's come up was there were two main other contentious issues on the committee. One of them was about impairment. It was quite timely, actually. A person known to many of us, Dr. Nick Smith, submitted on the bill. And he reminded us, which as the Minister did when he spoke, on the fact that when they did the alcohol legislation back in the early 90s, the random alcohol testing, bit testing, the same discussion about impairment came up. Whether someone was like a lithe, whether you could have someone who was a very robust individual, big athletic person, I don't know, like the honourable member Penny Hanade on the other side of the house, versus myself, a lean, fit individual. That might be taking a little bit of licence.
Members just opening himself up for more debate. Back to the bill.
Yes. Well, it is relevant. With all due respect, Madam Speaker, it is relevant because what we're saying here is so we had the same discussion because they would say that if a larger person could drink more alcohol and be less the same amount of alcohol as a smaller person, and therefore wouldn't be as impaired, and therefore they shouldn't be held that standard. Well, they just said no, that was an irrelevant argument. We went with a level that they accepted. That was the level, and it was accepted by everybody. And look where we are today. Generally, we accept the fact that we have levels that the public recognise that if you're above that level, then you're deemed to be unsafe to drive. And that we've moved well on from that debate, Madam Speaker. And the other issue was around the whole randomness. Was the randomness and the time limit side of it. First of all, the time limit. There was quite a discussion about this because people were worried that the police were going to hold people on the roadsides for a long period of time. Well, what that would, and actually, when you think about that, that's that's not actually what happens. The police don't want to hold people for a lengthy period of time. Their job is to process people as quickly as possible on the side of the road. If they get someone who they feel needs to be tested, if you have a time limit, then that would then potentially be someone gaming the system. That is not what we want, Madam Speaker. Look, I think most of the issues have been well and truly canvassed here. I'd like to thank everyone involved in this, and I certainly commend this bill to the House.
Aruna Williams.
Okay, so the Select Committee Grant McKellen is moving to is the Environment Select Committee.
Oh, were people complaining about my keyboard? How loud is it?
Yeah.
Loud?
Yeah.
My keyboard. Sorry, everyone. It's not like he had much of substance to say anyways. I don't know. He was talking about fitness and alcohol and... I don't know. Did he say anything important?
I don't know. I think he was regurgitating other members' speeches, to be honest. But hey, okay. At least we know what's happening. Now, I think we've had enough of drug driving, and let's shift over to the interrupted debate on the removal of Section 7A. So just to let you know, it is an interrupted debate. So we will have to come back to a future show to continue the talk.
This is a heavy subject too.
So actually, I'm glad it's been interrupted because it needs to be covered in one way or another. So let's cover Karen.
Second reading.
Honourable Karen Chua.
I present a legislative statement on the Oranga Tamariki repeal of Section 7AA Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Honourable Karen Chua.
I move that the Oranga Tamariki repeal of Section 7AA Amendment Bill now be read for a second time. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've stood before this House and highlighted examples on many occasions of harrowing abuse and heartbreaking tragedy where our young people have been let down. I've highlighted cases of neglect and death that I do not want to see happen again. I've spoken of baby Naril, baby Ru, and I've spoken of Malachi, Maya, Carla, Leanne, Faluti Vayala, and I've spoken of the Kahui twins, Nia Glassy, and there are many more. These are just a few of the young people who have passed, and do not include those who have survived, but not without a lifetime of trauma from the impact of their abuse. Let this not be our future as a country. Let there be options and tools available to us to resolve this. This is why I am so motivated, Madam Speaker, to put the safety and wellbeing of young people front and centre in all our decision making. And removing Section 7AA is just one of the components of helping to ensure this. I've seen firsthand the devastations on caregivers' faces and heard the pain in their voices after being told a forever home. It does not necessarily mean that. I've spoken previously of a family that managed to go back a few generations and find a Māori relative to avoid a reverse uplift after they were told their child might be removed from them because they were not Māori. The system has not been working as well as it can, and it needs some real change. My responsibility and my mission is to do everything I possibly can to help young people and to ensure their wellbeing and to provide the best outcomes for our young people in care. I want our system to ensure that every child in this country is raised in a loving and stable home that sets them up to succeed in life, regardless of their race or culture. I would like to thank the Social Services and Community Committee for its examination of this bill. I thank and acknowledge the 3,748 submitters who contributed to the consideration of this bill. And I especially acknowledge the submitters who spoke from personal experiences in the care system, including those who also contributed to the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in State Care and in the care of faith-based institutions. Care experienced young people, caregivers, whānau, hapu, iwi, I want to thank you all sincerely for sharing your perspectives. By majority, the Social Services and Community Committee recommends the passing of the bill, with amendments aimed at preserving the strategic partnerships Oranga Tamariki has with iwi and Māori organisations. This change is set out in the legislative statement. When I became Minister for Children, I made it clear that my intention was to focus the children's system on the wellbeing and individual needs of children. Of all the submissions on this bill, the importance of a child's wellbeing and safety was the most prevalent theme throughout. Some submitters, even ones who saw 7AA as well-intentioned, were concerned that it had mandated some harmful practice, was misinterpreted by many social workers, and was a barrier to best practice when making placement decisions with children. Unfortunately, 7AA has been used in some cases to justify unsafe care decisions or cause disruption for children and caregivers. I want our system to ensure that every child in this country is raised in a loving, stable home that sets them up, regardless of where they come from. Removing 7AA from the Act reinforces the need to put safety of children first. And I want to acknowledge the submitters who emphasise the importance of culture, whānau, hapu and iwi connections. I want to be really clear. I have never said that whānau, hapu and iwi should not play a role in the care of our young people. I support empowering all communities, and the Act already required this prior to the inclusion of 7AA. The repeal of 7AA will not alter that. What this bill does do is ensure that these cultural considerations are never at the expense of children and young people's wellbeing and safety. I maintain that 7AA has created a conflict for Oranga Tamariki when making decisions that are in the best interests of the child or a young person. I consider that 7AA allows children and young people to be treated as an identity group first and a person second, and it creates a divisive system that has had a negative impact not only on caregivers but children as well. Again, the most prevalent theme raised by over 1,500 submitters was the importance of wellbeing and safety. Most recognised that culture is important, but many submitted that this should never be considered at the expense of safety. I hear the concerns submitters shared that 7AA has led to decisions that favoured the interests of families, social workers and legislators over what was the right decision for the child. If family or whānau is the right place for a young person, that's what should happen. But unfortunately, that's not always appropriate, and we need to make sure that safety and wellbeing come first. There were caregivers who submitted on this bill who shared their experiences with 7AA being used to justify decisions that were not in the best interest of the child or young person they were caring for. In some of these submissions, caregivers shared the emotional and stressful experience of having a child being removed from their care to be placed with family or Oranga Tamariki attempting to do so. Those caregivers shared how these practices disregarded the connection and attachment with the child, and the trauma this disruption caused for not only the child, but everyone involved and their families. I never want to see a child torn away from a loving home for life because the caregivers are the wrong ethnicity. And I never want to see another child traumatised and sent back to abusers because they are the right ethnicity. That is what Section 7AA has contributed to in some circumstances, and I'm really proud to repeal it. I've always stated that I welcome the robust discussion during Select Committee process, and I acknowledge the concerns many submitters raised about the impact of this bill on strategic partnerships. As I've said before, this bill does not prevent Oranga Tamariki from retaining its current strategic partnerships or entering into new ones. But I want submitters to know that their voices have been heard, which is why I support the recommendations of the Select Committee to maintain the strategic partnership provisions within the Act, locating them alongside the other duties of the Chief Executive. Strategic partnerships support the delegation of statutory functions to community organisations, which in turn has contributed to keeping children and young people out of the care system in the first place, by enabling community-led early prevention and support. Some submitters shared how the strategic partnerships have been essential in addressing the needs of children and young people through culturally responsive care. Existing strategic care and partners also submitted on the bill and shared how these have fostered strong relationships with Oranga Tamariki. Many of them felt that these partnerships needed to be kept in legislation, and that's why I commend the committee's recommendation. Removing 7AA from the Act reinforces the need to put safety of the child first, and if this bill prevents just one child from being placed in a harmful environment based on ethnicity first, or prevents just one child from being removed from a loving and safe home simply because of this fact, it will have done its job. As a Māori person who has experienced the care system myself, I can tell you there's not much difference between a Māori child and any other child when it comes to dealing with the care and protection system. We want to know that we're loved. We want to know that we're safe. And we want to know that we're going to be cared for by those who are supposed to protect us and love us. This is why it's so important to treat children as a child first, as an identity second, so that all children can have a chance for a better future and a better life. I will continue to provide the best tools and options to support them to help protect all children from harm, because abuse and neglect does not discriminate, whether you are rich, poor, Māori or non-Māori. And I am so glad that we are making changes across the system, and I am so proud to be a part of a government that prioritises our children. I am pleased that this bill will help provide another option to help safeguard our children and keep them together with loving, caring families in safe homes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You guys ready? You guys ready? I bought the receipts. You guys ready for this?
I thought I might bring up a little fact just to make things a bit interesting here. The Select Committee ratio was 6 to the government, 4 to the opposition. just so there is some context why the bill has been recommended to pass. So, yeah, whereas some of the select committees on there are 50-50, this one isn't.
But
now,
are you ready?
Those receipts.
Are you ready? Okay, so the impact statement. I'm going to link that in the chat because I want everyone to read this to understand how full of shit Karen is. She is a fucking liar. And I mean that with the strongest language. She is lying, okay? The impact statement states that the department considers that a full or partial repeal of Section 7AA will not address the policy problem and recommends retaining Section 7AA will continue to strengthen practice and operational guidelines to fulfill the policy objectives and best address the government's concern. The problem is that the government's concerned about some of the practice decisions made by Oranga Tamariki, such as changes to planned long-term care arrangements, may have been harmful to the safety, well-being and stability of children in care. The impact statement also states departmental evidence demonstrates that the problem more likely stems from flaws in the practice of individual staff which have an ongoing commitment to address. Now, Oranga Tamariki was also limited by tight timeframes in the development of the impact statements and were unable to undertake public consultation with affected stakeholders. This is usually important for the public to be consulted on any proposed changes to legislation before they are considered by Cabinet. This is particularly important if there are groups that are directly affected by proposed changes. Repealing Section 7AA will not achieve its intended purpose to reprioritise the safety and well-being of children and young people in care arrangements. The difference in how care is perceived and enacted for Tamariki Māori versus non-Māori children can reflect cultural racism and institutional biases. For Māori children, care involves a holistic approach that considers their whakapapa, connection to whenua, and the collective responsibility of the whānau. Now, here's the icing on top of the shit cake. There is no evidence that Section 7AA is responsible for undermining the safety of children. There is no fucking evidence. And I'm incredibly angry with what Karen has done to use what she went through in state care as an excuse to undermine care for children that need it. Fuck this woman. Screw her. And you might have to put a not safe for work.
When I put it and go not all our shows are put it there not safe for kids. I don't ban them, but I make sure it doesn't end up being recommended for children.
But yeah, she is lying. She's lying. And I've posted the impact statement. Everyone can read it. She's lying.
God, she's going to hate you for saying that.
Yeah, she can hate me if she wants. I hate her more.
It's a very great about called freedom of speech and also freedom to be held accountable.
Guess what? I used to be an ACT supporter. Go fuck yourself, Karen, for what you're doing. Absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Okay. Willow Jean Prime.
Even know where to begin on addressing a number of the things that she said in her speech that are just not correct. They are not substantiated by evidence, by experts, by the many, many submitters that submitted to our select committee. She started by making what Tipua Ehrlich described when we had the first reading, an emotional plea, naming a harrowing list of children who have been harmed in state care. And that is absolutely tragic. However, it is not related to Section 7AA. So why does the Minister do that? It is disgusting to make connections between those who have been harmed and died in state care before Section 7AA even came into force when we are discussing and debating the removal of Section 7AA. The removal of Section 7AA is driven by political ideology. There has been no substantive evidence to substantiate any of the Minister's claims that there is some kind of conflict here. No empirical evidence. The Waitangi Tribunal ruled that. The submitters said that. The officials also said no empirical evidence to support the Minister's problem definition that this bill is seeking to achieve. It is purely political ideology. It is absolutely disgusting that we are allowing the removal of Section 7AA, which was put in, the very purpose of it, was to reduce disparities for Tamariki Māori in the care and protection system, because the history and the evidence shows that this mechanism was necessary to put a legislative requirement on the CEO of Oranga Tamariki to ensure that its policies, its practices, through strategic partnerships, through accountability and reporting, that it would reduce disparities for Tamariki Māori. The Minister says that she wanted robust debate and was prepared to listen to the submissions. Well, she has cherry-picked some submitters that support her views, and she has taken one of the recommendations, but importantly has left out, in my view, the most important mechanism in that provision in that section, which was the requirement of the CEO to reduce disparities for Tamariki Māori. So on the one hand, to keep strategic partnerships but not remain committed to that very outcome, what is the point? And then further to that, we had robust debate at the Select Committee about the accountability provisions, and the majority, as in the government side, voted to remove the legislative accountability requirements of Oranga Tamariki, of the Chief Executive. The member heckling knows, because the official said what is there is not like for like. It is not a replacement. They are not the same thing. Madam Speaker, let me be absolutely clear. What is there now is not what was there before. And so we have taken away the requirement of the CEO to reduce disparities and the accountability, legislative accountability of the CEO to that. Tupua Erlich, a survivor of abuse in state care and an advocate for those in state care in Rangatahi, said, if Section 7AA is repealed, it's a green light for this government to continue to sever our ties to whakapapa and culture, the most important connections to have throughout life. We are going to see more isolated, disconnected young people emerge from the care system, struggling to move forward. Madam Speaker, there were many submitters, and I want to acknowledge the submitters. It was very emotional to listen to those thoughtful submissions that were being made from a wide range of submitters, a wide range of sectors and organisations, from survivors of abuse in state care to iwi organisations and Māori organisations to paediatricians, health experts, hauora Māori providers, Māori Women's Welfare League, even on social investment. There was a wide range of submitters, and the majority of them in oral submissions were against what is proposed in this bill, and they gave so much good evidence to support their positions. Madam Speaker, there were a number of men who cried, making their submissions about the removal of Section 7AA and the actual harm that this will do to Tamariki Māori. To see grown men presenting to a Select Committee in tears about what is being proposed is not something I have seen in my almost 8 years here in Parliament. It was absolutely emotional, because this law change is going to have a devastating effect. The Waitangi Tribunal warns that the removal of Section 7AA will cause actual harm to Tamariki Māori. And so to hear the Minister gaslight us this evening, when we sat there and we heard the submissions and we saw the evidence, I'm so angry. I'm so sad. Madam Speaker, I can't understand how the Minister can stand here this evening, having received the Royal Commission's report into abuse in state care, which shows historically the very issues that Section 7AA is trying to address, the very harm that not having something like Section 7AA did to real people. Chapters of evidence, many survivors who presented to the Royal Commission talking about their disconnection from their whānau, their hapu, their iwi, their reo, their culture, and the real impact and harm that that did to them. The Minister was here for the tabling of that report. She was here for the apology, and yet that all meant nothing, because days after the tabling, here we are hearing submissions on the repeal of Section 7AA. The government did not even stop for a minute and consider the Waitangi Tribunal's report, which says it's a breach of te tiriti and it will cause harm, or the Royal Commission's report, which gives ample evidence that this type of action by the government and inaction to do deliberate things to counter that is going to cause harm. And the Minister stands up here tonight and says she's so proud. Well, I don't think she should be proud. This government is letting political ideology be put ahead of the safety of our tamariki and mokopuna, and don't believe a word that the Minister said, because she doesn't have the evidence to tautoko it.
I do not commend this bill to the House.
Well, she put it a lot more elegantly than I did. Hi, Mum. I know you're watching. Sorry about my language.
Well, at least yours has probably got no problem making comments. I don't think mine would actually make comments. If they keep staying incognito.
My mum's very passionate about this stuff as well. We often debate back and forth for fun. But yes, I'm glad that those comments were made. So again, going back to the impact statement, evaluation has showed that when processes were led by Māori, whānau had improved experiences, showing greater participation, and were empowered to change through early interventions and support. These changes have been associated with a reduction in the number of tamariki and rangatahi Māori that have entered interstate care. So the fact that she wants to undo this, why? She doesn't care about kids going to state care. She doesn't.
Because it's easy. It just sounds great.
It's just another attempt to undermine the Treaty of Waitangi.
Yeah, and I feel that she has just basically grandstanding her own experience of what happened with the child, youth and family system, and she's just basically whitewashing the whole thing. It's really sad that there's a very big disconnect between the two, and I don't, it's like, it's horrible. And the thing is, when the day comes, she's just going to be chewed out and spat out like no one cares.
It's just
pathetic. Like, it will dump her as soon as she's no longer useful.
They will absolutely dump her. And I just don't know how you can read through the submissions and through the impact statement and go, I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah, why can't David Seymour just be the person to read the bill? He's heartless.
And it's not going to change anything. They're going to, Oranga Tamariki is not going to go, well, hey, you're Māori, we're not going to put you with Māori children. Māori caretakers. No, they're going to prioritise who the best person is. And for a lot of Māori kids, that's often Māori whānau, whanaunga, extended family, people in the community.
Okay, let's see what Kaharangi Carter's going to say.
Party of Aotearoa to completely and fully oppose this abhorrent bill. Back in the day, when a beautiful baba, our precious taonga, were born into an iwi, a hapu, a whānau, they were cherished and revered. Māori understood then, as we do now, that tamariki, our precious taonga, come from the heavens, from the stars. Their mothers were understood to be portals who bring a soul into this world. There is an unbreakable connection, one that extends beyond immediate whānau, to hapu, to iwi, and the world around them. Children were and are so valued in Māori culture that they are included in every part of society. Back in the rā, children were connected and included. At important hui, where chiefs made decisions, children sat right on their laps and listened. And not only that, they participated and interjected because they knew that their voice was so valued that they would be listened to as vital members of their whānau, of their community, of nature. Children are te pito o te ao, the centre of the universe, intrinsically linked to their whānau and environment. That was the world they were nurtured in, a world where their voices matter. This callous bill is a direct attack on that worldview. It is an attempt to erase the place of whakapapa and to sever Māori children from the cultural roots that nourish them. The Minister persistently claims that removing Section 7AA is about safety. Yet their entire justification hinges on just two cherry-picked anecdotes. There is a massive difference between anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence. Again, today, the Minister replied on those two anecdotal cases. The Minister of Children's argument lacks intellectual integrity. The Minister wants to simplify, but I believe in the ability of all of us to understand the difference between anecdotal evidence and empirical evidence. Madam Speaker, whilst the submissions were opened, I travelled across the motu from Auckland, Tauranga, down to Christchurch and listened to the voices of those who have care experience, who were taken from their culture. And those are the people that I stand with today. Those are the people whose voices I uplift today. Child safety is paramount, and they live and breathe that. The Social Services Committee received 3,748 written submissions. The Minister might not want to listen, but the experts were clear. Dr. Luke Fitzmaurice-Brown, a lecturer in law at Te Herenga Waka, specialising in child protection and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, told us that removing 7AA, quote, breaches Te Tiriti o Waitangi, misrepresents tikanga Māori, will cause harm to Tamariki and whānau, will reduce the accountability of Oranga Tamariki, and will remove one of the only mechanisms for Māori to exercise genuine partnership with the Crown within a child protection context, end quote. Madam Speaker, care experienced experts, people who have actually experienced the state as a parent, said, like from the Voice Whakarongo Mai, said, quote, safety of our tamariki Māori and the connection to culture are not mutually exclusive. The Minister for Children is presenting a false dichotomy. Our focus on connection to whakapapa does not come at the expense of safety. The law is already clear. Safety of children is first. The well-being and the best interests of children are paramount. Whakapapa and whanaungatanga responsibilities are considered in care decisions, but never to the exclusion of safety, stability and well-being. Because we all want the same thing. We are all working for the same thing. We are working for the safety of our precious taonga, our tamariki. Madam Speaker, the lived experience and advice from experts isn't enough for the Minister. The Minister has not even listened to her own officials. The regulatory impact statement prepared by Oranga Tamariki on the 12th of March 2024 stated clearly, quote, replacing Section 7AA is unlikely to contribute to improvements in safety and stability. However, the repeal may undo the progress that Oranga Tamariki has made in building trust, relationships and accountability in the communities we work with. This may worsen the safety, stability and well-being of our children with the greatest needs, end quote. How can we trust that safety is the objective here? This is not a bill that protects Tamariki's safety. This is a bill that makes them more vulnerable. And let's take a look at the bigger picture. Let's take that eagle-eye view, because the Minister of Children is not just removing Section 7AA, she is gutting prevention by $120 million over 4 years. And the result of this will be funneling more children into Oranga Tamariki care, into state care. Simultaneously, removing the only legal protection that protects them from being torn from their whakapapa. In Te Ao Māori, we know that intrinsically everything is connected. Either the Minister listens now, or this government knows that in 20 years' time, there will be another apology for another stolen generation of Māori tamariki for the Minister not listening. Because at the same time as 7AA repeal is going through, the Minister refuses to accept the 138 recommendations of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse in State Care. We must ask, what kind of children's minister cuts prevention of funding, dismantles protections and ignores a comprehensive report on historic abuse? How can we trust that the objective is safety for our tamariki? If this government was serious about protecting tamariki, they would be focused on keeping them in safe homes and communities and not making it easier for institutions to take them away. An institution can never be a home. Just talk to anybody who has experienced state care. Under immense pressure, the Minister has made one minor concession, keeping strategic partnership in the bill. But let's be clear, at the same time, she is stripping $1.5 million to one of those partnerships, Kokiri Marae, overnight. This is not a genuine partnership. This weakens Māori-led solutions. The issue here is not that the law is too hard to understand or implement. It is that the government is choosing not to listen. We've had inquiries, we've had investigations, we've had commissions and reviews, and we know what happens when Māori tamariki are removed from their whakapapa and placed in state care. We have the testimonies, we have the reports, we have the Royal Commission of Inquiry findings of abuse in state care. Yet the government refuses to listen. An institution can never be a home. A home is within whānau, hapu, iwi, the belonging of our taonga in safe, loving whānau.
Paolo Garcia.
Okay.
Ngā mihi koe kahurangi. That was a beautiful speech, very well put, and she is correct about everything that she just said. If National backs this bill, okay, they don't care about Māori. This is the biggest red flag right here. It's like, oh, you know, you want to get rid of the support network for Māori? Yeah, that protects children and prevents them from going to state care. Yeah, no, you don't care about Māori. I don't care what you have to say about the Treaty Principles Bill at this point. You're full of shit.
Should we just say, Zulu Kilo, Papa India Golf is going to be landing at an airport near every dishonest minister soon? You know, it'll be actually quite nice if we can find out where the nearest airports to all these aerodromes or something where these flying pigs can land. Yeah.
Was this part of the coalition agreement too, Luxon?
Probably was.
Removing support for Māori kids who are disproportionately represented in state care? Was that part of the plan?
Probably won't even have a chance to sit there and read it. One of the social media team will probably sit there and just go, hide, block, whatever.
Yeah. Another example of throwing Māori under the bus to get into power. Thanks, man. I love it.
Yeah.
10 out of 10.
Okay. Paulo Garcia?
And thanking the men and women of Oranga Tamariki and every social worker who deals with family and young people and children, Tamariki and Rangatahi, the people who make the operations of Oranga Tamariki run on a daily basis. I acknowledge them. They see the worst of the worst and the best of the best. And I thank them. Madam Speaker, the Oranga Tamariki repeal of Section 7AA Amendment Bill repeals two main aspects of the obligation imposed by the Act on the Chief Executive of Oranga Tamariki. The first obligation is that the Chief Executive must report on matters related to the Chief Executive's performance of duties in relation to Titiriti o Waitangi, obligations imposed to recognize and provide a practical commitment to the principle of Titiriti. The second obligation is to seek and develop relationships, strategic partnerships with iwi and Maori organizations, including iwi authorities, in order to provide opportunities to and invite innovative ways, proposals to improve outcomes for Maori children, young persons, and their whānau who come to the attention of the agency. The object of the repeal, Madam Speaker, is to refocus Oranga Tamariki on prioritizing safety and well-being of children in all care arrangements. This aligns with the principle that welfare and best interests of children must always remain paramount. This refocusing on safety and well-being of children in care clarifies that cultural factors must at all times support but never compromise the best interests of the child. The Social Services and Community Select Committee have received many thousands of written submissions, over 3,700, and heard from 117 submitters in person. I take this time and opportunity to thank all the submitters for the care, the time, and the passion, and the emotion, and the difficulty that they had put in to their submissions and to submit in person, which was not easy for any of them. I also acknowledge the many submitters who spoke to us of their own personal experiences within the care system. Madam Speaker, our consideration of the repeal of the reporting requirements of the Chief Executive's duties under Section 7AA, in our consideration, we noted that Oranga Tamariki itself prepares an annual report which measures performance against standards agreed as part of annual appropriations. Oranga Tamariki also provides a quarterly report giving an overview of its progress towards its strategic directions, which, among others, set out how the agency is making a difference for children and young people, Tamariki and Rangatahi Maori, and their families and whānau. Oranga Tamariki also prepares a Safety of Children in Care annual report.
Whoa! Shit.
Cut him off. I don't want to listen to any more of him
Okay,
anyway.
no, I accidentally hit the X on there. What was it? Was it? Just a moment. Yeah, accidentally. So I'm clicking for a few different things, and I accidentally took the whole thing off.
That's all right. He wasn't worth listening to anyways because he's wrong.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's talking about, they do annual reports though. Yeah, guess what? When you remove Section 7AA, what resources, what obligation does Oranga Tamariki have to keep making those reports and continue developing partnerships?
It's like saying police are going to sit down there and double the amount of speeding taxation the next year. Oh, but you're not having any more cops to sit there and do it.
No, it's just, you know, repealing it is just going to remove the framework for how Oranga Tamariki is going to provide a practical commitment to the principles, the 3 Ps of Te Tiriti. It won't remove provisions to consider cultural factors contained elsewhere in the Act. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about. He He hasn't read the impact statement.
No, he's probably too busy on so many select committees. That is Auntie Gwen's first national MP that has represented her in the 7 years she's lived in Newland.
I'm sorry for her.
Yeah. Just I thought I'd mention that, considering, she does live in Newland. Okay.
But that was the man they decided to put up, so that's got to be National's position. So, yeah, thanks, National.
Well, I don't think they were expecting him to win the seat, to be honest. I will be honest on that one. I don't think they were expecting him to win the seat.
Amendment Bill. I rise in support of the bill on behalf of New Zealand First. And I would like to acknowledge and also echo the words of my colleague, Paolo, towards the submitters. It was a very emotionally charged, very passionate select committee process, and I really want to acknowledge how difficult it was for the submitters, those for and against, who came and were so incredibly vulnerable and shared their personal stories. It was heart-wrenching. So I really do want to acknowledge them all in being so brave and coming forward and sharing their journeys and their stories. Now, with New Zealand First, we are steadfast in our belief in the immediate safety and well-being of our children. And whilst we believe that cultural considerations are extremely important, we don't want this to impede our process and possibly putting a child's safety or security in any way at risk. I will again, before I close, once again, I just want to acknowledge the very brave people who submitted on this bill, and on that note, I commend this bill to the House.
And yes, I'll probably say her bill would be the closest to a seat warmer speech so far.
Oh, wow. It's so heart-wrenching. It's so heart-wrenching that she's just going to support it, isn't she? She's going to support it. So thank you for all your submissions and your heartfelt submissions. We're going to do it anyways. Fuck you. I'm getting very animated.
Right. Paul Barlow can't stand her.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God. It's like, she's like the Ice Queen. She's just chuck a shiv in the
God, she could actually make a very good Ice Queen.
Yeah, I'll just shiv you in the heart, It's like,
yeah.
God. These people.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting, just like the extremely of MP differences within parties.
We hear you, we feel you. Oh, we're going to screw you over anyways.
It's probably good that she was doing that speech, because I can't picture Andy Foster actually making a speech like that.
Oh, if he made that speech, I would just tell him to go.
Yeah. I can see your respect level drastically changing.
Yeah, it's like, no, there's no more left.
Yeah. Now, is it time? Now, will Stacey like to jump in? I mean, I can sit there and turn you on, but I'm not sure if she's willing to. Yep, okay, she's jumped in.
Why?
So now
Why?
What we're going to be doing for next Sunday.
Oh, right. Okay. Yep. Cool.
Yes. So we've been so the great thing is we've had pre-production meetings, we've had post-production meetings, all that sort of thing there, and we thought we might announce it live now so people don't make plans guessing. So next Sunday we are looking at doing a very different format show to what normally would be. So in the next coming week in Parliament, the House is in recess because everyone's going to somewhere across the country. I mean, David Seymour's already been said he's not welcome at Waitaki, but he's going to turn up anyway. Which, hey, that's all good. There are no select committee. There's 2 private select committee meetings for 15 minutes each, ironically, for the Social Services and Community Select Committee. So Tanya's going to be able to have a bit of a chance there to be part of that. But there is nothing in there. And there is estimated so far 10 hours worth of submissions to go through. So we're looking at, with increased speed, because we're not going to be, who wants to watch things at single speed when you're watching so many submissions? We're looking at running a omnibus special with myself, Laura, Stacey, rotating around who's the host from 3 p.m. till 10 p.m. next Sunday, dedicated to the oral submissions of the Treaty Principles Bill.
Yeah. Sam and I have been talking, and we got Laura in on this earlier tonight, just before we went live. Just the entire 3 p.m. till 10 p.m. block.
Yeah.
We try to rotate hosts. Make sure that we're all lined up for screen sharing. That would be helpful.
I've already been, Laura and I had fun playing around with it last Sunday.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've already sat there and seen Ray's already said he's going to be there, so maybe we have Ray host it for 1 hour as well.
Depends how he's feeling after work.
We'll figure it out. You know, he'll make it work. We know what Ray's like.
Yeah.
You know, he can sit there with one hand control a camera and another hand do remote editor on Ian's laptop. It's in the pellet shows.
Exactly.
Don't ask me how he managed to pull that one off. I struggled to try and do it on the one occasion I was meant to be in that dual role. Yeah.
Always onto it, that's why.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, he's the one who can actually do the broadcasting computer and the remote editor on the same computer at the same time. It's like him and I are like the only two who can actually do that. But then Nick has managed to do on-site editor and cameras, literally with the Stream Deck on an extension lead to the camera desk and doing the two, that it even gets to the point where you wouldn't even know there was only one person in the studio instead of two behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which potentially could happen. Also, just to put a note out there, the Te Awanui Ward of Tauranga City Council, Makaurau Sydney, the resignation has been made official, and so there'll be a by-election to replace him, and it'll be the first local body by-election under the new 10-week turnaround law. So this is going to be, a bit of a, it's going to be a bit of an interesting thing. Yeah, that's all good, Kiwi Skirt. You know, you're a busy person. You know, I'm sure we can make it all work. So that is the plan for next Sunday, is a 7-hour Treaty Principles Omnibus. Yeah, we're going to have fun to find some panelists for it.
I'm going to have to bring a lot of popcorn.
Let's go.
I'm going to have fun having to sit there and set up all the scene stuff and restream in advance. And there's going to be a shit ton of footage to edit on Monday next week.
I don't think you'll be expected to make every submission into its own video. That's so much work.
I mean, you could just title it 6 hours of shouting at the government.
Well, yeah.
That would be a good TikTok video. 6 hours at the government. It compressed into 10 minutes.
6 hours of shouting at the government you can sleep to.
Maybe that should be the TikTok hashtag 6 hours shouting at the government. Oh, this is so funny. Yes, I will keep that conversation that Ray has just messaged on Facebook in a private capacity.
I don't know why I thought that was the flat chat. Oh, that's funny.
No, Ray.
No, that was the stakeholders chat. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Ray. Oh, okay. Yeah, Ray. Yeah, Ray's done that. Yeah. Not the flat chat, the stakeholders chat. Yeah.
Yeah. My phone went into bedtime mode, so I didn't notice the difference.
Oh, yes, and the thing is, so is mine.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Take a word from every 5 minutes and turn it into a sentence. I'm sure we could, and it would still be legible, actually.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get ready for a 7-hour marathon next Sunday.
Yeah. Submissions open, are we doing that?
Oh, yes. So the submissions that are coming up, do I read them or someone else want to?
I'm too busy putting them in the chat.
Okay, so yes. If you want to annoy Nicola Willis with your budget policy statements, please get them in by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Maybe you could sit there and say, no landlord tax cuts, reverse the landlord tax cuts, pump loads of money into Dunedin Hospital.
Money go here instead.
Yeah, money go here instead. Yeah, the Broadcasting Repeal Advertising, Repeal of Advertising Restrictions Amendment Bill closes this Friday. I forgot the Offshore Renewable Energy Bill closes this Thursday. Good day to sit and write a submission on Waitangi Day for those who aren't working. The Resource Management Consenting and Other System Changes Amendment Bill closes on Monday the 10th. The Criminal Legislation Stalking and Harassment Amendment Bill closes on Thursday, the 13th of February. And the Crime Increased Penalty for Slavery Offence Amendment Bill closes also on Thursday, the 13th of February.
Now, I just want to give a tip for people that are writing in submissions. Read the impact statement for the bill, because that usually comes out before we even get to look at it. So you read through that. It's available for the public to look at, and it will give you some good arguments for or against the bill.
Well, that's a lot better than what I set into the mind for the partial strike submissions bill. I did put some good things in there. I believe that payroll deductions should have to report, partial strike deductions should have to be reported to the IRD as part of payroll, payroll information sharing.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, it's going to be a very, and for Paul, yes, it's going to be a very interesting 7 hours. That's how much food. We've got a taste of about 2 hours today. It's going to be full on. But it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. And hey, we can watch Gary Judd again.
Yeah, let's watch Gary again.
Yeah, Gary.
Let's go, Gary.
Yeah, hold on. Yep. I noticed that Ray said he'd tried clicking on the budget policy statement link, and error 404 because I've just clicked on it too.
Is that the one oh shit, I wonder if that's the one that we've got in here.
And yep, oh no. Okay, I don't know what I've done wrong because I've pulled them straight from the list.
Oh,
maybe they don't want anyone to submit on it.
It's worked for me.
What? Okay, that's weird.
Yeah. No, I've just clicked and it went straight through the website like normal.
I blame Gary.
Yeah, we blame Gary the KC.
Yeah, but I also tried the second one, whatever that is, offshore renewable energy, and that came up as a 404 as well. So I don't know what I've done wrong.
Okay, and that's working for me. Okay, who knows?
Through the
at least offshore renewable energy is a few days away. Yep. Okay, we will get moving and we'll see you next Sunday at 3 p.m. where we'll all be blurry-eyed, up on caffeine like crazy, and watching, and eating a lot of popcorn.
And hopefully I'll be a lot more calmer too.
Yeah.
Less shouty words.
Yes. See you next week.
Okay.
Thank you for watching The Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/itsinthaballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by